Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this sort of version of Compliance Risk and Team Tim. Let's just take a second for everybody to say hello, welcome. I'm Tim Golden, MSP owner at Vital Tech and founder of Compliance Risk. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, people, process, technology, as we always say, inviting our special guests, Jesse and Tim. Jesse, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Jesse Miller. I'm the founder and principal consultant at PowerPSA. We help MSPs and MSSPs build and scale security programs.
Nice. And then Mr. Tim.
Tim, thanks for having me on. Tim Schnurr for FortMesa. FortMesa is a compliance as a service SaaS tool, but also a vulnerability and risk management tool. So excited to jump in this conversation.
So as we just kind of sit here a little bit, wait for people to get in, I can see Steven's over there on LinkedIn. Welcome, Steven. How are you? Maybe drop in comments where you're from or any of your burning governance, risk, compliance, people, process, technology questions as we kind of go through this. I like to ask our guests. Tim is going to know this one, so I'm going to hit Jesse up first, right? So, Jesse, if you could have lunch or dinner or hang out with, an individual for a day in any time worth of history, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess probably Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Just read the Gulag Archipelago again last year and got some great insights from that. And that man has been through so many different pieces of history and really to the depths of his soul, I guess. And so I think he'd be an interesting conversation to have.
That's interesting. So I don't know enough about him to kind of comment on that, but yeah, I guess I'm going to have to Google him and figure it out. So yeah. What about you, Mr. Tim? I'm not going to ask you the same question because you've answered this a dozen times before. You look a little frozen, so hopefully your internet connection is good over there.
Can you hear moving around?
I'm going to ask you a different question, and that is favorite meal of the day or favorite food of the day?
Favorite food of the day. I'm going to have to say the morning smoothie. Which is like pretty religious, 7 days a week almost. I think it's my one healthy meal of the day, but it's usually pretty delicious, full of all the, I don't know, there's literally like 15 ingredients I throw in there every day, but favorite food of the day. So
nice. So little logistical item, Tim, if you've got other things running in your background, sucking up internet bandwidth, turn them off.
Yeah, I turn my VPN off. Dangerous.
You are definitely, Jesse, I'm assuming you're seeing the similar kind of thing that I am with Mr. Tim and all blurry, right? So, yeah. So anyways, today, favorite topic, people, technology, process, one of mine. Jesse, you want to give maybe a second or two of your background, and then as sort of Tim from FortMesa fades in with his internet connection, we can give him an opportunity to say hello.
Yeah, no problem. So kind of an interesting path that I've weaved through technology over the last 20 plus years. I started off working in carrier services for Ameritech, SBC, Quest, all those companies that used to be around and have since been gobbled up, but moved into managed services about 15 years ago, started at a startup MSP. We were actually a PBX VAR when I joined. Employee number 5, helped them build that to a successful MSP IT practice, and then pivoted into MSSP and built a successful security practice for them, and did that for about 7 years. And then recently have started my own company, giving my playbook basically to other MSPs how to build successful security programs.
Nice. Tim, you're back. Yay. I can see that you're back.
Awesome. Sharing my screen, I'm back. So, yeah, so I apologize about that. Basically killed everything except the feed and the slides here.
Nice. Nice. So, so why don't we just get right into it? Let me kind of pull this up and share that over there. And yes, here we are. What is missing in my technology stack as an MSP?
Yeah, and more importantly, probably your cybersecurity stack, right? Your cybersecurity officer.
Yeah, this is going to be a challenge there, Mr. Tim.
Are we having a problem?
Yeah, your internet connection is not.
Your cybersecurity stack, right? There's a delay there. Yeah.
Definitely. So, what I'm going to do while
I'm going to leave and come back. How about that, Tim?
yeah, and in the meantime, I'll just go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint myself until you come back, and we can kind of go through this a little bit, right? So, why my slide is not right either, right? So, in full internet fashion, hardware, software, internet failure. Woohoo! Welcome to the wonderful world of technology. Usually, StreamYard is usually pretty good, but while we kind of battle things around here a little bit internally, Jesse, close all browsers and turn it off. All right. Thanks, Stephen, for that comment. Very helpful. Hopefully that's what he'll do. So
do it 3 times.
Yeah, and click your heels 3 times, do some spinny winny, right? And then grab your Pepsi or something. But always fun when we have a little bit of challenges when it comes to this stuff. So thanks. Anyways. GRC, big scary word, right? When we Google GRC, we come out with like, oh my goodness, look at this eye chart. Like, it can be scary, right, Jesse?
Yeah, I think I know when I was getting my start in cybersecurity, and whenever the topic of GRC would come up, I would kind of always try to change the subject, right? But I'm someone who always likes to boil things down and simplify things. And so when you talk about governance, I always go back to the definition of the word, or where did the word come from, right? Governance, government. What's the purpose of government? It's to govern and ensure that the laws are followed, that things are orderly, and that systems work and are accomplished. Now, whether that happens or not is a topic for another live stream, but I think we can think about cybersecurity governance the same way. It's really just ensuring that we're doing what we say we're going to do, and that we have a plan for overall execution of the cyber program of the business.
Good key points. Yeah. So, I always kind of pull back. Oh, look, hey, Tim's back. Hey, Tim. So kind of pull back to
guys.
People and process. Like, I'm a very task oriented, tab A, slot B. Like, when I think of the word governance and I bring that down to its root, like to govern, right? To have a thing in place, a process in place, a methodology, maybe some guidelines that we follow, kind of look at that as minimalistic definition of govern, right? We want to have a thing that we follow with the people that we do and the, tools and regulations to get us there, right? The risk part, well, I mean, that's pretty easy, right? Like, bad things can happen, right? And so, thanks, Chris. Bad things can happen. Kurt, great question. And we'll get to that here in a second. And then compliance. Compliance is really just a way for us to have a set of rules that we can all play by, kind of getting in there, like, what is that definition? How do we go? Like, Jim, I know you had some thoughts on this, and welcome back. So.
Yeah, thanks. And I apologize for my internet. Might have been my earpods or something like that. But anyway, you were talking, and I did see a glimpse of the slides there. There was a GRC slide with, 25, 50 moving parts, right? And I'm actually, before I joined the channel only 2 years ago, I was working with large companies, and those were GRC, or governance, risk, and compliance, as you said, is an InfoSec team department, hundreds of people working on kind of GRC. And that, I think we talked about this a little bit in the green room, but like, when I think of GRC, I think about what is its real purpose, right? Like, what are all these hundreds of people doing in a large corporation? And I think I like to say $1 saved is $1 earned. So they're protecting enterprise value, right? So governance, there's a little bit of a cycle here, I think, but a lot of these things are people, processes, and technology, right? So, the topic of this podcast was really about, what do we think are typical in the channel with typical MSPs and small businesses? Like, what do we think they're missing? So, dollar, like I'll keep saying that a dollar saved is a dollar earned, right? So, customer saved is a customer earned, right? So, I really think that like utility and providing, risk management, which is probably a loaded word as well. So, but just, really the thoughts on, how do these small businesses and the MSPs that manage them provide that same utility, right? Of protecting those businesses, and how are you out there conveying that message to the customer that a dollar saved is a dollar earned, and I'm here for you. So
good stuff.
Yeah. How would, just a quick question that popped up in my head while you were talking there, Tim. How would you guys, I'm going to posit something and give me your feedback on this. I would say that if you're involved with the security of your customer in any way, you're already doing governance. It's just, are you doing it well? And do you have a structure for it? So you're involved in governance the minute you get involved in protecting your clients. And that's one way to think about it, to make it easy and somewhere to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead,
That's a
Tim.
really good point. So since Tim can't drive the slide, well, this Tim can. Will the real Tim please stand up? I'm kidding. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about is kind of the word compliance, right? Because that's another scary word. Like governance, yes, we get that. Risk makes total sense. Compliance, right? Big scary word. MSPs tend to run it. They think rules, they think frameworks, they think controls. They look at NIST 800 and blah, 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 and they get a little freaked out on the word compliance, right? We tend to think of compliance as sort of the security referee, right? The cybersecurity referee. And so great. We kind of put a little article out here on our website talking about what gets measured is what gets done, right? We look at compliance as the way for us as an MSP to kind of have a guideline, a set of rules, a playbook for us as the MSP to follow when we're trying to help our clients comply or adhere to or follow some sort of law, some sort of regulation, some sort of thing that they are legally or contractually obligated to do. And so for us, compliance really means what's the playbook? Who's the referee? What guidelines are we following? Where's the yellow flag coming out? That kind of stuff. So that's kind of how we approach it in our MSP is great. This is awesome. Now I have a roadmap, CIS, right? Implementation group 1, 2, 3. I have literal roadmap step by step of what this means to build that defensibility in my client and to get them safe and secure and meet their contractual obligations.
Yeah. So Tim, you just mentioned that, and I don't know if you showed the slide on some of the compliance frameworks or standards. There you go. Right. Like some of these are following the rules, regulatory necessity or burden. I don't think I want to call them a burden, given the slide you just showed before, but and you were asking like, what does compliance mean and how are people using it in the channel? And it may be misused, but I think compliance is actually not always about rules and laws and things you need to follow, but also, best practices, standards as well. So like CIS is clearly, as far as I know, it's not legally required anywhere, but it's obviously a great set of like best practices, a great playbook or framework to work towards in a GRC situation. So I like to think of it on a positive perspective, like best practices, things you can do. I joke around with Tim. I don't, I like to think of it as like tips or guides, right? I want to hit the ball. I want to hit a golf ball 350 yards. Like, what are some of the things I can do? Right? Like, what do I need to do? What's the technique? Like, what's the strategy? Give me a personal trainer, right? Like, how can we help? How can we help these MSPs in the channel? Like, make 50 to 70% margins, right? Like, let's hit the ball 350 yards. So I like to think of it in a positive aspect, like selling roadmaps, selling best practices, selling, where it fits in that. How we're using the word GRC, or you hear the word compliance as a service out in the, frequently in the market. What does that mean? I think it means different things to different people. But I really like to think about like best practices or, things that you can be offering to the customer and conveying value. Why are we doing this? Like we said, $1 saved is $1 earned. And that's why we're doing some of these things. So.
Yeah, and just to dovetail off of that, I mean, I think that's exactly right. Now, there are industries that are regulated in like HIPAA or things like that, where you do have to follow a very prescriptive set of standards, and there's more liability there. So obviously, you don't just want to dive into that headlong without proper assistance. But taking the CIS, for example, you could take IG1, which is the lowest set of standards, and you could even pull things out of that. I know that's what we did when we were beginning our security program, is break it down into manageable chunks, right? Take the CIS and look at it. I mean, just look at it with your own intelligence and say, okay, our customers aren't going to do that. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. But I think they can do all these other things, and make your own custom framework or compliance for your MSP. And then you can brand it for your MSP, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where we're talking about making these margins and shrinking things down where we can focus on them and then deliver on them. And then we work outward in concentric circles from there. And so I think a lot of the problem and why it is scary is because we try to boil the ocean. We try to do everything at once. When we forget that we don't have to, we can break it down into pieces and start learning and iterating. And we'll look back in 2 years and say, wow, can you believe we were scared of GRC? So I think that's the way to approach it from a tactical perspective.
Yeah, Jesse, really great points, right? So, this, I've been in this, dealing with these frameworks for decades, right? And so, when we originally started our 853, was just, I'd say a handful of controls.
That's a tough one.
now, if you look at 853, there's 1,009 controls on there. And then once, and the best thing that I felt like they ever did for 853 specifically was allowing for inheritance and allowing for control tailoring. Yep. I know in the weeds, but we were able to tailor down and then inherit a bunch of the controls. So we're down to like 300 or so, nice. 327 controls out of 1,000. So, but that's the whole point, right? When you look at NIST, or as Tim said, CISA or HIPAA, right? When we start this program with our clients, the very first thing that we're doing, besides onboarding and RMM and fun things, all the bits and bytes that we as an MSP love to do, is have those business conversations with your clients, right? Right. If they're a dentist shop, we know that they are most likely a HIPAA covered entity. And then we can start to iterate their security practices and program towards a HIPAA-based framework, right? Maybe they're not. Maybe it's, this is a really great example, right? And Tom Watson and I, my CRO, and I will be talking about this in the coming week. Maybe it's Bob's Furniture. Maybe our client is Bob's Furniture chain. And what does Bob's Furniture usually do? Come on, you know this one. They offer financing of their stuff. And because they offer financing, what applies?
PCI.
Well, not just PCI.
Graham Leach Bailey, the new one, the FTC.
Yeah, so the new FTC safeguard rules will apply, right? So kind of bring this back a little bit, right?
Yep.
When we think about the frameworks, when we think about, how do we approach this with our clients? When we think about, oh my gosh, thousands of controls, I'm overwhelmed, initially having that conversation as part of the business units within those clients. What laws, what regulations, what are they legally and contractually obligated to meet? And if you don't know, and you want to have an expert like ourselves, like Tim, like Jesse, come alongside you and help you with that, we'd certainly be able to help you with that. But being able to take the laws and regulations, attach them to a framework, now we have a roadmap. And in instances where you don't, pick something, start someplace.
Well,
I love that's the that, Tim. I hear that one a lot. Yeah, pick something, start somewhere, right?
Yeah. Well, I think Tim S would sign on to this. Most risk platforms, or any sort of cyber performance management platform, if you start with the CIS, they can crosswalk the controls. So exactly, getting started and then getting what they're doing in there and starting to have them work towards something. If you come across a regulation that now they're susceptible to, then you just crosswalk it to that regulation and you'll see the places that you need to improve, but you've already got a head start on it. So I think you don't have to know everything about compliance to get started. Back to my original point is, pick the CIS and pare that down and start small. So,
yeah. And I think, as you said, there's more and more regulations coming in. This is not going away, right? Like there is pressure. There's all kinds of customer catalysts, we'll call them, right? Or customer nudges that are getting them into this, right? Like there's traditionally been HIPAA, CMMC is coming along, but there's also like commercial interests, right? Like SOC 2 is like very commercial driven. I think CIS is going to be more more noticed or more kind of used or leveraged out there, right? Because there's all different kinds of things. Cybersecurity insurance, which we could have a whole hour-long conversation about, and how they're starting to require some of these frameworks as a measuring stick, right? Like they want to see where you stand. And then some of the other urgencies, maybe like a third-party due diligence, right? Vendor due diligence. You've got a small business. They are a furniture warehouse, but Tim, they want to do business with Amazon. What is Amazon worried about? Their data parked in your parking lot, right? So, that third party due diligence is something that's happening everywhere, and the ability of the client to be prepared for that, to evidence it, to document it, and to use that measuring stick, right? Like a CIS, some kind of framework that they can have a good reference point that, whoever the big company is that's demanding it can come up with that quickly. So I think commercial is just as important as like regulatory, and it's really driving customers. And I think MSPs that position themselves and really take a hold of these frameworks are going to really distance themselves and really differentiate and be able to monetize, what are we calling this, compliance or GRC or whatever it's called here, right? Yes.
That was a great point. Really, I think you're right about that.
So Chris was all over there watching on Facebook Live all by himself. So sorry about that, Chris. Welcome aboard. Hey, here we all are. So, excuse me. So, Steve's got some really great comments here. I just want to kind of pull up, right? So, talking about risk appetite, right? So, Jesse, what are your thoughts about approaching it like from a risk appetite perspective?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think you have to, it's kind of like sales in a way. You have to think about what matters to the client. What is their risk appetite? What's their business? And so we as MSPs, that's our job, is to get inside what our clients are thinking, what their business does, what are its risks. And so when you think about what's important to your client, Bob's Furniture, and I'll go back to that example, if they're down for a day, it might be okay. They can take paper receipts, and that's not a huge driver for them. But data protection is. So we look at all those things and we have to design a cyber plan for them that makes sense for their business. And so again, I'm going to go back to the CIS because I think it's a great place to start. Taking the CIS controls, and the next step is, rather than just saying yes or no, what's the priority of the CIS control for this business? And so that's a great story to tell to the business owners that say, hey, we took this framework, we pulled out the stuff you don't need, right? We're making things easier for you. And not only that, we prioritize controls based on your business. So it's a customized risk score for you. And here's the top 5 things you need to do. And that's much more digestible than giving them a long list of, 100 different things and saying, well, we have to do all this. So you're going to have a lot better results when you approach it that way.
Yep. And so, so I'm just going to pull this up over here real quick because Steve's making a lot of great comments, right? So, this whole thought about having to understand, I keep clicking the wrong damn button. Sorry about that. Having to understand their business and where it's headed, right? So, you've heard me say this before. I think Tim loves it when I do this. And that is, I started out building computers in the garage like everybody else, right? Tinkering, realizing it was not going to be great. And then before I knew it, I was helping my neighbor, and I became the de facto, hey, my iPhone's broken. And I iterated through building computers to go into a company doing technology, to rising through the ranks, to realizing, hey, we can do this on our own, to building out an break fix kind of shop. I hate to use that term because we were providing services, shifting to now we're a managed service provider, right? So we've seen this iteration in the space, starting from, like me, guy in the garage, to becoming the de facto computer guy in the family, to figuring out, hey, we could probably make money at this by fixing stuff, to now we're a managed service provider. And the next iteration is us as IT service professionals, as MSPs, is becoming those strategic business partners and understanding their business. It just happens to be, and going back to the title, like the technology piece, we've got that. We know that. We can do that. We're ones and zeros, bytes and bits kinds of people, right, as technology professionals. Where we're trying to level us all up is, just like Steve said here, understanding their business and where it's headed, right? So maybe I want to talk a little bit about like that. Jesse, I know you kind of have a lot of good background over there at PowerPSA, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
So I think in terms of becoming a business advisor and a strategic advisor, it's partially about keeping your ear to the ground for new technologies. And I'm going to go more MSP here, and I'll tie this into security, but keeping your ear to the ground for new technologies that are going to enable their business. I mean, I can't tell you how much it means to different ownerships or leaders in another company when you see a news report or a new technology and just shoot them an email and say, hey, I know you're working on XYZ. I thought this might be interesting, something to consider, even if it doesn't directly benefit you, right? You're basically an employee or an extension of their business. You're living out that mantra of the MSP. Mm-hmm. So how that relates to security is in that same way, is starting to come to the owner ahead of time or to the business leaders ahead of time and saying, hey, this is on the horizon for your business. We have to start thinking about and planning for this. And so how you're positioning yourself as a risk expert with the business, and it goes back to that governance thing. I think we all hear GRC and we kind of, our minds go blank a little bit, or, if you're not familiar with it, but just relate it back to corporate governance. I mean, we all know what corporate governance is. It's a board steering the company. Well, GRC is a cyber professional or a cyber executive steering the cyber program within the business. I mean, it's a business within the business. And so as you start to think about it that way and position yourself that way, it's a longer education, not sales cycle, but more of a trusted advisor type of model. And you just have to adjust to that new longer turnaround time to it, I think, is the bottom line.
Yeah.
Great segue into how does this relate, right, Tim?
Yeah. No, and absolutely. Tim G, you just started, and I think Jesse, you carried it on. Having that conversation with your client. I know we did some invites on LinkedIn to other people, and I tried to avoid former Big Four people I worked with. A little secret sauce on Big Four consulting, right? Like, how are they so successful, right? Like, they become trusted advisors for Fortune 500 companies and big companies, right? Like, you need to think the same way. How can your MSP become that trusted advisor? The more time, the more face time, the more conversations you have, the more you learn their business, the more they learn their risks, the more you learn their opportunities, digital transformations, cloud migrations. We start to like think about all the other offerings that you may have under the hood. It's really, it's always going to be beneficial time. I know there's probably some nightmare clients out there, Tim, but the better you can understand them and the better you can gain that trust and become that trusted advisor. I had an old managing director who used to talk about problems. The client's problems are our assets. He told that to me, right? Like and that really kind of resonated with me. Like the fact that you're the only one out there trying to fix that problem, it's your owned opportunity with the small business. So
yeah, absolutely good stuff, right? And so thinking about like bringing this down to the SMB, you mentioned the big four, wireless successful, all that fun stuff, right? So listen, a lot of businesses, the mom and pop shops, right? The 2 to 6 to 10 employees, humans at their organization, right? I guarantee every one of them has their accountant, unless they're a CPA firm and do their own. They have their lawyer, unless they're a legal firm. They probably have their cleaning company. They probably have their trash pickup person, right? They most likely outsource a lot of these portions of their business, right? You as the MSP, you're the outsourced IT person of their business. Now, let me ask you this question. Do you think that the cleaning company is consulting on their business to that small business? No, not quite who they are. But you as the professional, just like their lawyer, just like their CPA, probably just like their doctor, and so on and so forth, you as the professional with years of experience that you have can be and should be and part of those conversations, right? We're not here to fix ones and zeros. Like, yes, we can, but the real reality is we want to be their lawyer. We want to be their CPA. We want to be their IT business partner. At least that's how we approach it at VitalTech at our MSP is we're your strategic business partner. Don't look at us as fixing mice. Like, no, like that just happens to be a thing that we do. Like a CPA prepares taxes, right? Or a lawyer writes a document.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned law firm, right? Like, so the law firms may start to dip their toe into this a little bit. I mean, the accountants have like the whole SOC 2,
Oh, yeah.
So they are the trusted advisors out there, but IT is more closely related to cybersecurity, and you have an opportunity, right? Like, you understand their systems. The more you can understand their processes, you own the passwords. You're the admin on all their accounts. You had a slide up earlier, Tim, really that big slide, which had, the like GRC and the whole life cycle, right? That's really like all these aspects. Like, IT is the IT help desk and IT team has to understand all of these aspects, right? In a big corporation to serve that. So like the same thing, like you're manage IT, you're the sysadmin. You're gonna have to understand all the life cycle here. Someone wants a computer, like are they allowed to have local admin, right? Like you can just start, and you had a list of kind of like all the accesses they're allowed, and what are all the rules implied like with tied back to the IT. So technology really is just like, it's largely an enforcement mechanism of as you said, like governance and risk usually. So you've really got to seize the opportunity. I mean, that's kind of what we're getting at, right? Like credentialing yourself, seizing the opportunity, having these conversations. It's really, you're really going to benefit from it. So.
Yeah, good points. So Heather, yes, addressing the super small organizations. I mean, let's face it. don't quote me on the stat. I know we're live. I can go Google it afterwards, but what is it, like 70 to 80% of businesses in the United States are like under 50 employees, something like that. Like it's a huge number of the businesses, here in the US are really tiny, quote, quote, right? They're under that, SBA, $18 million, blah, blah, blah. Like they're not small business, they're micro businesses. And
Right.
those are like, as MSPs, those are the ones that we support, right? Probably average client size for most people here in this live stream, I bet is probably 15 to 20 humans when you look across the board, right? So addressing that at a small business, yes, it does come at a price, right? But, being able to internally gaining your efficiencies and building out your process, building out your people, building out your process will give you those efficiencies to come in at a little lower rate while still maintaining margins and making it affordable for those nonprofits like Heather was mentioning, right? Micro businesses. Exactly. So, Nick, what's the best password manager? Thanks. Should we say LastPass or should we not? Like, should we just open up that can of worms?
Yeah, I saw it on the web pages. Like that was their de facto
charts. BPNM. I've talked a lot about BPNM. Yeah, we can get into that here in a minute about BPNM. I don't know where we're going. I was a little distracted by it.
Tim, you talked about like you had that one slide as well. It's like you're not going to have 200 people being InfoSec and the risk management team, right? So like, how are you going to replicate that? Like, where are we going with this? Like, I think we've kind of beat the horse a little bit on like what GRC is, but like, how do MSPs provide the same utility, right? And like, what does that look like in a break fix shop, in a monthly fixed monthly billing shop? And Jesse, I think, started to talk about like I really like what you said about kind of like baby steps and just like try to bite a little bit off at a time. And right, like how are you going to make this a 50 to 70% margin business, right? Like, so maybe you could jump into that and just kind of like how you work with clients and talk about.
Do you have a slide?
I think we understand it now, but now it's like, great. Now what do I do?
Yeah. No, I'm going to jump back and kind of keep that thread going because I think it's really important to understand. And not only, again, as typically as MSP founders, most of them are on the technical side. Now, that's not everyone, but we tend to like tools. We tend to like gadgets. We, taking things apart, so we gravitate toward the technical side of the business. And so that's number one. Yes. Break it down, take a subset of the CIS, create a low watermark, especially for those small businesses. You even need to shrink that down because they're just not going to be able to afford all the controls you really want them to have. But create 2 or 3 and say, this is prescriptive. This is what you need, low watermark. And that is governance. You're doing governance for them at that point, right? But you've shrunken it down to a size that they can consume. And that goes to my next point is you have to understand the size of business you're talking to. So having different low watermarks for your micro businesses, for your small to medium, for your SME, and then for your enterprise clients, if you have those. Each approach is different and each low watermark is different. So you need to understand that and target that. And then that comes back to what I was talking about in terms of RevOps and being as focused on automation in the sales, in the prospecting, in the quoting, in the account management, putting all the automation and all the process into that we put into the technical part of our business. Because guess what? That's where your sunk costs are. That's where you're losing all your money is administrative overhead is not properly tracked and it's not properly optimized. So there's a lot of opportunity there for an MSP to shrink margins without doing really anything at all in terms of their offerings. And I'm kind of ranting right now because I'm very passionate about it. But
yeah, I want to hear what somebody else talks. Most recently, absolutely. Tim, talk about Polygon, and it's not automation, right? But what is it, right? Like, so it's certainly better than doing it on a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll totally subscribe to that. Shameless plug for Polygon.
Yeah, so thanks for that. I'm just gonna kind of pull this up, right? So Kurt already seeded this conversation way back in the beginning, and it wasn't even a prompt, but thank you so much, Kurt. So yeah, I know the biggest challenge, policy, procedures, never have consistent stuff, all the things like legal liabilities around that. Kurt, you make some really great points here, right? So excuse me one second. I'm going to kind of do this real quick and take the focus on Team Tim for a second, right? So listen, we use all the GRC tools. In fact, back in 2007, I even built one because I was tired of dealing with Excel, right? The whole point of this conversation today is people and process. Like the technologies are the technologies. I could flash up, hundreds of business cards of GRC tools that I use, that our MSP uses every single day, right? However, the piece that I'm finding is that a lot of them, while they say they're a governance, risk, and compliance tool, they don't actually govern, right? As we kind of back up to where we were in the top of the hour, what does that mean? It means to have a process in place that you can repeat time after time to gain your efficiencies, but then be able to prove on the other end, documents are being versioned, right? Things are being looked at. Like, heck, I say this all the time. I had a customer not too long ago. They haven't updated their employee handbook in 14 years. Not only does that pose a lot of potential risk in the business, but they may have been doing things that weren't outlined in the handbook. Like, for example, they made it a corporate policy that when a family, how do I say this politically correctly? When a family is pregnant, that both of the humans or the appropriate humans can take time off of work. I think there's a word paternity and maternity leave. Maybe I'm using those incorrectly, but they made it a corporate thing. Like, hey, your family's having a baby, you can take time off. But that wasn't outlined in the handbook. And so, it put this potential risk in their business because nobody looked at their handbook in 14 years. Why did they not look at the handbook? Because they kind of either forgot about it or weren't reminded to do it, right? Yes, you're talking about Polygon. It's our SaaS application to help you with the process of the governing thing. Yes, it has the ability to send out reminders and notifications and attestations and all these big buzzwords that really help you bring a process in that governance, risk, and compliance space into your MSP and helping your clients iterate through documents, iterate through policies, iterate through procedures, right? And so what that really means at the end of the day is having a process in place. When we talk to people at our peer group, the first thing that I help them define is who's going to do this in your business? Who at your MSP is the human that becomes the champion behind your process, right?
Yep.
And that's where I start with is the people. And you know what? You don't know how to do it. You need help. We have a peer group for that. There's plenty of things on LinkedIn, plenty of things on Facebook. There's all kinds of places where you can go and get help.
Yeah.
Find the human and build out the process. And that's where Jesse comes in, right? The process.
Well, I think that's a fantastic point. And it's one I make to my clients as well is if you're not ready to designate at least one employee in a security role and have them focus on that full time, you're setting yourself up for failure. You have to make that leap. And they don't have to take them off all of their duties day one, but there needs to be a progression plan to get them over to security and be running that plan. And that goes for even if you go the 100% vendor partner model, there has to be one person that knows your clients and becomes that liaison and that bridge between all the vendors you're using to provide these services for your clients and your client and make that all make sense and make that transition. So you need to have a named role for that. So Tim, I think that's a fantastic point, and thanks for bringing that up.
Great. All right, Mr. Tim, what do you think about the people in the process part?
Yeah, I mean, the people and process part, as we said, there's this GRC aspect. There's, I I wish there was more automation. I'd say we're probably likely in the first inning here in terms of things getting automated, things getting easier, but there is a lot of people aspects of it, right? Tim, there's a lot of questions to ask the customer, learn how things work. What's the employee exit policy, right? Like what is, do they have an incident response policy, or even just like who's in charge of this data, right? Like who's allowed to access it, right? So like there's a lot of questions and a lot of people time that's going to have to be built. And we had a slide up earlier that really talked about like break fix or monthly, and like how do you put together an offering or a plan and sell that. FortMesa really tries to help the customer build, or help the MSP build the bundle that they can sell. Will help you budget time and budget kind of like what you think it's going to cost to deliver that, and then you can mark it up accordingly. But that, you know, like I said, I really think we're in the first inning. A lot of it is orchestration, trying to bring everything kind of into one pane of glass. Like which kind of things do I need to do? And Polygon and FortMesa both obviously strive to like make a dent in that, but like there's still a lot of people time, right? And actually creating these processes, updating them, keep making them living documents. These cybersecurity roadmaps we talked about earlier, right? Like it's a journey, and the journey is never going to end. Like you're going to just keep increasing that progress and posture. I think we talked about, you know, when we posted the invite for this LinkedIn, we talked about like stop reselling tools and start making progress, right? And I think a lot of what we talked about in the last 45 minutes is really about like selling progress, selling a roadmap, selling increasing posture, as opposed to reselling tools where the tools are very important and they do fit in the frameworks, right? Like if you go to CIS, like EDR is in the framework, and firewall and MFA, and all these tools help enforce GRC. So there's just a lot of work, a lot of documenting and evidence. The more we can automate that documentation and evidence would be, make everyone's life easier. That's our goal, but I think it's like really the first inning. But you still need to really budget your time, figure out, like in a break fix shop, it's probably easier because it's time and materials, right? Like this is almost like an engagement, even though it may last for a very long time. And then for more mature MSPs, right? Like they're typically billing per month, biting off that little bit, like Jesse said, just like, and Tim said, start somewhere, pick something, do something, right? And like, let's go nice and slow. Let's do one control a week and sell that, right? And
like the start someplace, right? So here's the thing, right? Let's kind of put it in terms people can understand and break it down. That's not even in the technology space, right? I break my leg. I don't expect to wake up tomorrow and have my leg healed. That's going to be a process. It's going to heal over time. I might have to do physical therapy. I might have to do stuff. It's iterating that process over time. To bring that back into our MSP, we talked a few minutes ago about the people part. Make it somebody's job that's the human, right? Make it somebody, and you know what? It doesn't have to be a 40-hour-a-week job, by the way. It can be, and that's maybe more right?
And bill your client more for that time, whatever it is. Right? Like, and figure out like what that is. And if you didn't convey the value well enough, you're probably gonna have a hard time selling this. But this is probably another get together we can have and talk about conveying that value.
Something simple, just as we're talking about this, and I know it's not exactly the thing, but just places to get started is looking at the CIS. And this is low effort. It's not no effort, but it's low effort. You know your client's environment pretty well. You know what tools they have. You know what they're doing. So go do some napkin math with the CIS on their current environment and come up with a rudimentary risk score and start there. Have this conversation with your client. Hey, just say this isn't, set in stone. This isn't official, but just knowing what we know about your environment, you're in between a 70 to 80% risk score. And that's not good. And people are scared to have that conversation with their client because they're afraid the client's going to say, well, what do you mean? I thought you were taking care of that, right? But there's other things you can do to deal with that objection. Number one, making a slide and talking about, we had to hire new people. We have new people that are doing X, Y, and Z. What happens when a cyber alert happens on your machine? An analyst can have a slide with this. An analyst has to look at it. It's got to get escalated up to threat investigation. Then it's got to go get triaged. All these things have to happen to say, even if it's not a problem or it is a problem, that's all net new expense. And that's why you need these things. And so kind of pitching those value props, but to take it back, doing that just simple napkin math CIS assessment for your clients and starting there and saying, identifying, we have a problem, we need to change this, is the first step to really starting that conversation and starting that journey as the trusted risk advisor with your client.
Yeah. So,
Awesome.
so I brought up the CIS tool here. I dumped it in chat. We weren't going to go here, but hey, here we are, right? So, yeah, look at that, a tool to go help you, right? Because this is not about tools; it's about people and process. But here's the thing: a thing like the CSAT tool from CISA will actually help you define your process. We know CIS is iterative. We know IG1, IG2, IG3, they build upon each other along the way. So I literally start with the first thing in the first group and go, do I do this? And is it documented?
Right.
Okay, great. Do I do this? And is it documented? And so on and so on and so on and so on down the road, right? And so, we're kind of getting close to the end here. I could talk about this stuff for hours on end. I want to kind of bring it back to what are some of our key takeaways? While Tim, you're talking about some of the key takeaways, I'm going to just kind of pull up some of the comments here to see if we haven't missed anything. So go ahead, Tim. What are some of your key takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, the key takeaway is, as you said, you got to start somewhere, do something, pick something. I think it is like a CIS gap assessment, an IG1, right? Like 1.1 is what you guys both know. It's the inventory, right? Like, how many MSPs do we hear in their cybersecurity offering offer inventory management? I mean, I look at hundreds, thousands, and it's not something out there, but it's the most important thing, right? Like, if you don't know what you're protecting, you can't protect it, right? So, inventory management, like, start really jumping into that tool that Tim mentioned. We have our own CIS gap assessment tool as well. It's a worthy exercise. It's a quick read. Just get in there, spend 30 minutes there, just to understand kind of like, what do they think are the most important things? And they're in order, as Tim said. So I think that's a great start. You can start to conceptualize like, all right, shit, now how do I make this an offering? How do I resource this? How do I get the customer to pay for it accordingly?
Right.
And then, Jesse said before, like, there's going to be some objection handling. There's going to be some, how do you convey that value, right? That's it's going to add. So
come see me.
Yeah, come see Jesse. Yeah. So those are my takeaways. But I know we threw a lot there. So if people just understand kind of GRC and kind of what it does for a large corporation, I think they can try to containerize that and just conceptualize like, how can I convey that value to a customer that a dollar saved is a dollar earned. So
great point, Steven. So hey, I love the fact that Steven's just plugging away here on LinkedIn, because you just like keep chiming in with the right things at the right time, and I don't even have to prompt people. So woohoo! Jesse, your key takeaways.
So first of all, get a low watermark. Get that tomorrow. Figure that out. You can all sit down with leadership in your company and figure that out. What should our clients have? And you might be wrong. You might be a year from now, hey, we were wrong about this. We didn't need that. But get something going. Start measuring your clients against it and start having risk conversations with them about that number. Make it simple. And, I think don't be afraid to charge what it's worth either. So don't cheap out on the charge here. It costs what it costs. And if you churn 1 or 2 clients, but you pick up 10, you just got more time back in your day. So that's actually a win. So those would be my takeaways.
All right, tell us about the name. I popped it up there on the screen. PowerPSA. Like, oh my gosh, really? A PSA? Like, wait a minute, we were just talking no tools. We want process. Does that mean
it's a funny story.
Administrator PSA? Tell us about that.
Yeah, no, and I know that it is a little bit of a clickbaity name, I guess, but it stems from back in the day when we were starting our security program in the MSP. The PSAs and the RMMs just couldn't do what we needed them to do, and we couldn't afford a SOAR. So we were writing everything in PowerShell. We were automating everything with PowerShell. And so we kind of had the joke running around that we got a PowerShell PSA. And so I bought that domain probably 6 or 7 years ago. Just, oh, that's a cool name, you know. And when I went to start the company, I thought, you know, I want to take that same approach, automating everything and working with what we have to enhance processes and build that into a company. And then now it's kind of changed a bit, and power is like the lifeblood of all technology, right? And PSA to me is more than just a tool. It's people, it's processes, and it's technology. So PowerPSA.
So P stands for process, or people, systems, application. I don't know.
There you go.
We'll come up with a new acronym for you, right? So
yeah. And so bottom line, what we do is we help MSPs build successful and scalable security programs, and we fix broken security programs for MSPs and MSSPs who have them in place.
Nice. Good stuff. Good stuff. So, so here we are kind of winding down, couple minutes left. You know, obviously I just dumped the links on there where to find us. Jesse at PowerPSA, Tim at FortMesa, me at Compliance Risk. You know, we're going to be doing a few more of these, right? Our goal is to help you all as the MSP sort of start to level up what you're doing, right? Tom Watson and I, who is our new CRO at Compliance Risk, we're going to be doing one on the FTC safeguard rules and how they apply and how you can help your clients. So be sure to do the like and the follow and the fun, you know, all the socials, so that you get notified about the upcoming FTC safeguard ones that we'll be doing. You know, would love a reshare, you know, all those fun things that I'm supposed to be asking you. But really, at the end of the day, our goal here is to take the stuff on Team Tim's brain, bring in experts that can help us, you know, like Jesse, and kind of help you help your clients, building those defensibilities, building a process, and helping you gain, you know, more cybersecurity practices within your MSP and within your clients. So, Tim, any last words?
No last words here. I think you said it all. So I appreciate you having me on. And you know,
can I plug FortMesa for Tim? Can I plug FortMesa?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jesse.
So if you guys are struggling with vulnerability management, FortMesa is a fantastic product for MSPs. They've built the EPSS into their tool already, and it actually provides you with out of these 10,000 vulnerabilities.
What's an EPSS? I always stop my guests and to help them quantify an acronym.
Scoring system.
Exploitability prediction scoring system. It's like the CBSS, but it actually works.
It's actually provided by the same people who put out CBSS.
It is. First.org. It's the new standard for vulnerability scoring, and it actually shows you what the likelihood that a vulnerability will be exploited is. And so that's built into FortMesa's product. In my opinion, vulnerability management is one of the hardest things for MSPs to do successfully when they're building a security practice. And I think FortMesa makes it extremely as easy as it can be for any MSP. So plug for Tim there.
Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Brain Dead Friday.
So look at that. We got through all of this. We didn't hit the last slide, but we just kind of hit the last slide, which was Q&A and kind of wrap up. So here we are, 3 o'clock, end of the day. Find us on all the socials, like, comment, share, tell a friend, phone a Tim, go Team Tim. And thank you so much. And we look forward to doing something in the future. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.